name of our loving and ever-present God. Amen. Be seated. So what is a deed? Now, come on, not the kind of deed that you have to pay for when you're buying a house or land. What is a deed? D-E-E-D. What is a deed? It is something that is done, correct? And what does it mean to do something? Right? What is it? I mean, you don't really need to answer that one because it's really obvious. If you're doing something, you're doing it, right? I mean, that's called tautological. One does what one does. It is what it is. All of those things. This scripture, I had the recommendation that before I started preaching, I should just bring a card up from behind here that said, John 3:16 on it. Everybody would go, yeah, he's good. Yes, sir. God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son to the end that all that should believe in Him will not perish but have everlasting life. But I believe Luther is the person that said that sums up the gospel in very succinctly. And it is true, it does. And then if you read the rest of the scripture that follows it and surrounds it, then you get into this whole thing about, well, if you're not Christian, you don't get to go to heaven. If you don't believe in Jesus specifically, you are out of sight, out of mind. We can use the Gospel of John to justify pogroms, and we can use the Gospel of John to crucify others. If we want to. If we want to. We can take this wonderful Gospel of John, which is the Gospel of light, the Gospel of sunlight, the Gospel of light that not only melts the snow, but enriches the earth in a way that before we know it, we are going to see life bursting forth on this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful earth around us and the plants. We're going to see it. And that's the light. That's the kind of light that we are referring to in the Gospel of John. And yet in the Gospel of John, we also can take that light and we can turn it out. Can't we? We have the choice. We have the choice of turning the light on, or approaching the light, or turning it out. What are deeds? What are deeds? You all know that I've been working on this paper for the last project, going on 7 full counting years. The end of May will be the anniversary, the end of 7 years. And part of the construct of this has to do with conflict in the churches. In churches. And what happens in the church specifically after, say, a clergy person, there's been conflict and the clergy person leaves for whatever reason, whether or not the person is leaving ahead of the posse, or whether the person is just no longer able to stand up to the things that are being done to that person. There's an individual who has this wonderful name. His name is Speed, S-P-E-E-D, Lees, L-E-A-S. What a great name. Speed Lees is an expert on conflict in congregations. He indicates that the center of most conflicts in congregation is actually the clergy. That's where it is. And that shouldn't surprise anyone, because the center of the conflict in faith 2,000 years ago was in the leader of that faith, the leader of the faith in Jerusalem, against the leader of the faith that comes out of Galilee, out of Nazareth. It shouldn't surprise anyone that that's where the conflict often is. People take out what they want on the individual who is in front. And one of the questions over the years that came up, and it's a very hard question to answer, one of the questions that came up over the years is, well, Jim, you're talking about conflict and how you deal with things, what happens in a congregation after the conflict where the clergy person leaves, and here's a question for you. What happens if you are an individual who knows that what is being done to him or to her is being done on purpose? What are you going to do with that? Now, you don't have to be a clergy person to experience that. I mean, I don't live in all of your houses, but I know that in your lives, all of your lives, I know this, that at some point, someone has done something to you on purpose. Someone has done something to hurt you on purpose. Deeds. Deeds. Do. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Deeds. Deeds. And here's the hard part. I'm just going to use myself as an example here. I know in my life there are at least three persons in my life that I feel that if I could go and see them now, I would apologize to them with all of my heart for what I did to them. For what I did to them. Now, I know that there are more than 3 people that I need to do that for. But I don't know how much time I have left. I don't know how much time I have left. Jesus, it says right here, and just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. So you all probably remember this, where the children of Israel were complaining, oh God, this food is awful, we're hungry, we're starved. And we used to have a lovely, comfortable hovel back in Egypt. and now you've got us out here in the desert, and it's really bad, and it's hot. Oh, it's hot. And they started getting sick because Moses complained to God, and God said, well, there are snakes out there, they better be careful. And unfortunately, a lot of snakes appeared. The children of Israel were being bitten by the snakes. And so they were then complaining about dying from the snake bite. And so God said to Moses, well, make a bronze snake, put it up on the stake, and anybody that looks at it will be healed. And those that don't look at it will not be healed. It's that simple. And so some did and some didn't. Deeds. Deeds. And the analogy is perfect because the gospel writer John says this is really what the message of Jesus is about. Jesus is going to be raised up onto the cross for our salvation. And if we look in this direction, and if we subscribe, 21st century word, if we subscribe to the doctrine of Jesus Christ, then we can look to saving and being saved. We can look to saving and being saved. And our choices will no longer number those choices which intentionally wound others. Or, as often as possible, that choice will be taken out of our range of choices. Do and deeds. Because there's this wonderful thing in this succinct gospel line. For God so loved Vern. God so loved Alex and Emily and Keith. God so loved all of us that He gave His only Son for a purpose. And that is that we all be saved. That we all be saved. That we all be saved. To the end that all who respond to that will bind themselves together into this world full of light. And the deeds will be of the light. And the deeds will bring flowers into the world and green grass into the world and blossoms of love into the world and music into the world. For God so loved the world that He gave His only Son,